Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the EmpowerUp podcast. I know it's been quite a while since we've been on here. We took a slight hiatus just to kind of recharge, I guess, for the new year. But we're back. We're pretty excited to be here. Again, I'm Byron Beasley. I'm a software engineer. We also have Steve Meehan, who's a professional recruiter. And we have a special guest with us today. We have Matt Sanchez. He's a junior producer at Deck Nine Games. So we figured our podcast kind of focuses on people trying to get into the industry or people trying to transition into the industry. So we thought that Matt would be the perfect guest to kind of help bring us out of this hiatus and try kind of provide his insight into what it's like working in the game industry full time now and what his journey has been along the way. So yeah, Matt, you want to go and introduce yourself and we can go from there?
Yeah, absolutely. Matt Sanchez, I've been in the industry for just about a year and some change at this point. And yeah, you guys picked a really good time to bring me back on because I am going through a transition myself. I actually just had my last day at Deck Nine on Friday as a junior producer, and I will be transitioning to an associate producer for Solid State, which is a new studio that Activision is pumping up to
Okay,
work on Call of
cool.
Duty Mobile. So yeah, I'm really excited. And I get to talk about all that stuff. So
Right on. And like one of the things that I absolutely love is that we've been able to kind of see you in your journey as a professional in the video game industry. And for those who didn't get an introduction to you the last time or the last episode, can you kind of give us a synopsis on how your career has panned out? Like what industry did you start in? How did you end up transitioning into video games? Kind of give us a little more background.
yeah, absolutely. So, I my first job ever was at GameStop when I was 16. It was the best job I've ever had. I loved every minute of it. I worked there for about 2.5 years. And I took a lot of notes from that as I kind of went forward, and I didn't realize how important that was going to be until I got into the game industry. But yeah, I did that in high school. I left for the Marine Corps in 2013. I was in the Marine Corps as an artillery cannon crewman for about 4 years. Came out and I was like, I'm gonna come back home to Chicago, and start school. So I got out in December of 16. I turned around and I started school right in January of 17. And initially, I knew I was really good with money and I was really good with working with people, and I was really interested in business and stuff. So I started with a business administration degree. I eventually transitioned to a um, business management degree with a concentration on leadership and change. And um, I was actually going through the recruitment process for a consulting firm, and I was like, I'm going to do consulting for a few years, and then, maybe eventually from there I can kind of make the jump to an industry that I'm a little bit more excited about, or really get kind of specialized. And I was talking to my fiance, and I was seeing the work that she was doing and how passionate she was about the direction she wanted to go. And we were doing a lot of talking about school and stuff for her, and there's something kind of clicked for me, and I think I took a step back. I did a little bit of soul searching, and I asked myself, and I said like, hey, when was the last time I was working a job, aside from the Marine Corps, that I truly loved and I truly was passionate about. Um, and that brought me back to GameStop, and as silly as it can be, like I loved being around games. I loved talking to people about games. I love educating people about games. And so I kind of made the hefty decision to turn away from consulting, and I was going to solely focus on applying into the games industry. And it was definitely very scary, but I met a lot of really cool people along the way, Steve being one of them. And I learned a lot, and I think at that point I was trying to figure out, where do I fit in the puzzle that is game industry, because I'm not an artist by trade, I'm not an engineer by trade. I have those management skills and stuff, but I was like, what does that look like? And that's when I kind of started to learn what production was, and I was like, okay, this is something I could do. Like, this is something that I enjoy doing. I love being around creatives and kind of funneling them into the right space. Um, and I got really lucky. I found my job at Deck Nine. I interviewed and did the whole deal in like 2 weeks, and I had my job offer, which was awesome. after, just applying and searching and doing all these things. And it was in Colorado, which is a place that we wanted to move out to already. So we got a chance. We moved out in January of 2021, and came out here, started kind of working, getting my hands dirty, learning just what it means to actually work in the industry and not just be a fan. Um, and I always kind of knew that Deck Nine was going to be a short trip for me. I knew that I wanted to make my way to PlayStation, or make my way to Activision to work on Call of Duty. I had higher aspirations, um, and there were definitely some things that kind of came up that were frustrating and kind of pushed me to start looking a little bit. And I ended up just kind of getting really lucky with the connections that I had, and things finally just lined up. And one of the guys that I had met, who was a recruiter at Activision, sent me a listing for an AP role with this new studio, and he was like, "It's Call of Duty Mobile, and it's a brand new thing and stuff." And it got me really excited. I interviewed with the executive producer, and then interviewed with all four of the senior producers, and I got to hear more about it. And it just sounded like the perfect fit. I had gained a ton of experience from my time at Deck Nine, and now was kind of my opportunity to go working on IP I was excited about, but also like kind of test myself, and see like, hey, this past year and change that I've been working and doing, has that all been legit, or have I just been, just faking the funk, And so with this being a new studio and us being the ones kind of creating the pipelines and the strategies and the processes, it's like, this is my opportunity to like, see, like, get that gut check, like, all right, am I a good producer or what? So I'll be starting that in the next couple of weeks here, and can't be more excited.
Awesome. And first of all, on behalf of everybody listening, just want to say congratulations to this amazing step that you're just taking in your journey right now. And thank you so much for sharing it with us, because like we're seeing this happen as it's going on.
Yeah.
And I remember the original conversation that we had where you mentioned it to me, and I was like just remembering how passionate you are about the whole Call of Duty franchise, and knowing that you're making that step into working on the game that you're so passionate about. It's been a there have been challenges, absolutely, but this is part of working in the industry, at least from my understanding, is that not just knowing what it is that you love, but having the passion and the work ethic to keep going after it. And that's one of the things that I love every time we talk to you, is we get that. And can you talk about, like, obviously you've taken many steps, right? And we never know how the dots are going to connect unless we're looking in the past. And I think that's something that you mentioned as well. Can you kind of talk about your experiences at GameStop in the Marines, and how those all kind of tied together to prepare you for where you are now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think GameStop, and the reason why I continue to refer to it, and I probably will till the day I die, GameStop was my first experience with, working in something that you love, and learning about it from a different perspective. I think people oftentimes with the games industry, they're like, oh, I play games, like, yeah, sure, I could work in it. And it's like, it's a whole other side of the book, experiencing games as a fan and experiencing games from a professional standpoint are two very different things, and they complement each other, sure. But when I was at GameStop, I wanted to go because I was a fan of games, and I got there and I started to understand, like, this is a business. We need to sell games. Like, we need to keep this store running. Like, we need to do these things. And so that was my kind of foyer into, okay, like, this is how I interact with this media that I'm so passionate about as a professional. This is also where I got to experience, that people always say, do something you love and you never work a day in your life. I still definitely do work. But it was that experience of like, this is cool. I'm not just like working on spreadsheets, or I'm not just doing something, and not a shot at people who like working on spreadsheets. I know people that love Excel. So like, if that's what you do it. But for me, it's like, I love being active. I love being up and talking to people and talking about games for 8 hours a day. And so that really kind of coming forward, like I said, when I was doing that soul searching, and I was like, what, I want that feeling again. I want that drive. And I had the same drive when I was preparing myself to go into the Marine Corps. I come from a pretty stagnant military family. We have a bunch of people all over the place, and I prepared myself. I did whatever little research I wanted to do, but a lot of it was just you know going for runs and doing push-ups and doing all those things. And it's because I was passionate about it. I knew this is something I wanted to do, and it doesn't need to be something you do for the rest of your life. I knew that I wanted to go and I wanted to be a Marine, but I wasn't going to retire out of there. I knew I had other things that I wanted to knock off, and that's okay. I checked that box. I did what I wanted to do, and I'm benefiting from that now. Um, and now as I'm going into games, and kind of like you said, Steve, like I've been so passionate about this IP, and not just as a fan playing the games, but also just what Activision and the Call of Duty Endowment does. When I was in college, I did a lot in the veteran nonprofit space, and I knew that nonprofit work was something that I wanted to continue in my professional career. And I was like, I want to go somewhere where, I can do that. And Call of Duty Endowment was a huge thing, a huge goal, I think, of mine to get to be able to say like, yeah, hey, I work at Activision, I work in Call of Duty, but also in my spare time, these are some other things that I get to do through my job, that are benefiting people that are struggling, and the people that come from my group. So it just absolutely incredibly happy and incredibly excited, and it is not an understatement to say that I'm very lucky that within the first 2 years of my career, I've gotten to make the huge jump to an IP that I'm passionate about. Not everybody gets to do that, and I will forever be happy and glad that I've been able to do that so far.
So I'm
Yeah.
curious. Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Byron.
Yeah, I'm curious as well. You kind of touched on it a little bit with your job at GameStop and the kind of different perspective you had, right? Working there versus being a fan. And I know that one thing that certain schools or certain people might sell is that, or people may think is that you're just playing video games all day when you work at a gaming company. So, how
Hmm.
has your perception changed since you started working professionally in the industry? And are there any like misconceptions that you may have held or hear often that
Yeah.
don't hold true once you're in the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you say that, because when I first started, I was still getting all my stuff set up, and Deck and I was going through a bit of a transition. So I'd gotten my computer and everything, and I was talking to my boss, and I was like, all right, like, what do you need me to do? And she was like, well, we don't have a lot for you to do right now, so how about you play the build? At the time, it was Life is Strange True Colors, it hadn't come out yet. And she's like, how about you play the build? And I was like, wait a second. Am I actually about to get paid to just play video games? Has it just all been a lie? And so um, I did that I got to do that for a bit, which is really cool. But yeah, I mean, I think um, I think sometimes you have to check your fandom at the door. I think it's great to be passionate about something, and Deck Nine is very similar in terms of a lot of the artists and a lot of the people that work there love that IP and love that franchise, and you could see it in their work. Um, but at times you have to check that at the door, and you have to say, okay, I'm a fan. This is exciting, but I have a job that I have to do. I have things that I have to do that aren't going to be exciting. I'm not going to get to play the build, for 8 hours today. Like, I've got some other things to do. So I think um, I didn't really run into an issue with that. I could see younger people maybe running into that as they're starting to figure out where they want to go and work. Because in reality, being a producer is very similar to being a project manager, in the business world where I initially was coming from. So a lot of those same principles translate over, and you go in and you're like, okay, I have to manage these people. We have to do these things. And sure, you're talking about cool stuff. You're talking about managing a pipeline for animation and cinematics, and you're like talking about what the characters are going to look like. But at the end of the day, from my perspective, if I was in business and I was just managing a pipeline for something else, a lot of those same things, I would be doing a lot of the same things. This, it just had the opportunity to say, hey, you need to deliver this sword, by the end of the month, which is cool. So, yeah, I mean, I think that there's definitely that misconception. I also think that there's a, maybe not a misconception, but I think people early on just struggle to figure out how they fit into the puzzle. Like I said, for me, not being an artist or an engineer, I was like, what could I possibly do? Because in my mind, it was like, this place is just made up of artists and engineers, and that's it. And they just do stuff, and then games happen, a couple of years later. And there's so much more to it. And as you get to a bigger studio or a bigger publisher, there are even more opportunities. One of the senior producers at Solid State, aside from the various other things that she's doing, one of the things she talked to me about was like business analytics. Like that's an area that she's maintaining. Like that was something producers did not do at Deck Nine. We didn't do anything with business analytics, but because we're getting to a bigger IP, there's more moving parts. There's more things that need to happen. Um, so I would say, I think to anybody that's looking right now or trying to figure it out, don't be disheartened if your degree is in something that may not be, or your skill set, I should say, is in something that you may not fully envision in the game industry, because there's probably a job for it. You just have to find that job, or you have to find the pathway to that, and then you're like, all right, what are these little things that I can do to get up to that point, and that might be like, maybe I have to start in QA, or maybe I have to start somewhere. And, I think people kind of will turn an eye to QA at sometimes, but it's like, you have to start somewhere, and one of my past managers told me this when she had started. She worked like 2 or 3 years in an area that she wasn't super crazy about, but she wanted to get to this other one. And she was talking to her manager, and her manager's like, man, you're doing like a great job, here. We love all the work you're doing. And she was like, yeah. Now imagine if I was working over here, which is an area that I actually really want to work in and I'm passionate about. Imagine the type of work I could do. She did the kind of show your hand first, and prove yourself, and then get to where you want to go. And she was able to move. And so that was something else that kind of stuck with me, which was like, if I don't get into production right away, if I have to start in QA, I'm going to do the best QA job I can do, and I'm going to learn what I need to do to get to production or to get to engineering or whatever. So, a long-winded way to answer your question.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting as well. I know this is something that I'm facing. Where I currently work now, I kind of have one role, and I'm trying to transition to another. It's
Mhm.
it's worth mentioning that no one's gonna know that you want to do that other thing unless you put it out there that you want to do
Yep.
that.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, you have to be communicating those things, and not even in a bad way.
Yeah.
I think one thing for me that throws people off a little bit when I first start a job, I get kind of the lay of the land and stuff, and then I go to my manager and I'm like, hey, so I'm a AP right now. What do I need to do to become a producer? And at times people can take that as like, oh, are you not happy with this brand new job that you got as an AP? And it's like, no, no, no. I'm very happy, and I want to continue doing what I'm doing, but I have goals to become a producer. I want to become a senior producer. I want to do this, that, and the other. And so while I'm getting myself settled and while I'm doing my work, I want to have in my head what you are expecting from a producer. Because then I can figure out what are the things that I need to be learning right now as I'm doing this stuff to then make it so that when we're talking in 6 months or a year, I'm saying, hey, remember when you said these are the things you want out of a producer? Well, I'm doing all those things now. So, what are the other things you want out of a producer? Or if there isn't anything else, what's the pathway look like for me getting to producer? And you just do it that way. And same thing for you. Even if you're swapping over to another role, same deal. It's like, what do I need? What are the things that you would want from someone in this role? And what are the things that I can do now to start learning how to get to that spot?
Yeah, absolutely.
And like one of the things that I love that you're touching on is how beneficial it can be to treat ourselves as a business. Because if you step into a corporation or a well functioning organization, you'll see that they've got a mission and a purpose and goals and like a 5 year plan, a 1 year plan, quarterly plans. And a lot of the things that you're mentioning right now seems like it lines up exactly with that, right? If you know yourself what your goals are, what's your future goals like, and what it is that you want to do, it's my experience that when you're with the right managers, they'll help guide you on that pathway, because it's not just about a company that wants to suck the life out of their employees. It's actually about a very collaborative relationship in we're going to help you get what you want and you're going to help us get what we want. Like is that far fetched? Is like, what's your experience with that?
No, yeah, I think that's right on the money, and I think that the most important part of that, and Byron even brought it up earlier, is being a self advocate. You know, you have to, you can go in and you can work with tons of great people, and you can do all this really amazing stuff, but if you're not advocating for yourself, there are people that should, you know, if you have really good managers, there's people that'll be like, hey, you know, you're doing great stuff, like let's talk about this. But if you're not initiating that conversation, it's going to take much longer for you to get there, you know. And that's in the good and in the bad, you know. Like I said, I had some frustrations with Deck Nine, and if it weren't for me being a self advocate, would I kind of get to the point where I figured, you know, hey, I don't know if there's any more that I can do here to develop myself. And I think the best thing that I can do for self advocacy right now is look elsewhere, you know. And that's nothing against them. That's nothing against my managers, whatever. It's you taking a step back, looking at what your journey is going on right now, and saying this is the logical next step. This is what I need to be doing, or I'm going to be stagnant. You know, and I think there's a lot of people. You know, when you get to individual contributors and you get to engineers and artists and stuff who they can get put onto their favorite game. You know, they can get put onto Batman, and they could just be an engineer or an artist on Batman for 6 or 7 years and not move because they're so happy about what they're doing, and that's great. But you have to be able to take that step back and say like this. I love that I'm working on this, but what's the next good jump for me? You know, and if that means I need to move to a different IP that maybe I'm not as excited about, but I'm getting a promotion or I'm getting more responsibility or whatever, you know, maybe that's the move. You know, I had no particular affinity for Life is Strange when I was applying. You know, I had played them, I'd enjoyed them, but like they weren't my favorite games. And I was worried when I first came in that I was going to be like a leper because I was around so many people that love these games. Oh, sorry. And I was around so many people that love these games, and I was like, am I gonna get shunned because I don't feel the same way. But for me, I was like, this, I need to make this happen because this is a junior producer position. This is an entry point for me into the industry. This is a place where I can go that's small scale, that I can learn a bunch of stuff and prepare myself to move on to that next course, you know. And I mean, I played all the games before my interviews. You know, I did all the research and stuff, and um, yeah, I think that's part of that, like checking your fandom at the door. You know, if I ever have to move on from Call of Duty onto the next thing, and if I'm not moving directly from Call of Duty to Metal Gear Solid, you know, I'll be like, darn, but you know, it's fine. You know, if I move and I'm like, hey, I have to go work on World of Warcraft, cool, that's a whole new experience. I've never played World of Warcraft, I have no idea, but it's the next jump, you know, and it's gonna hit either way. So,
Yeah,
um,
that goes along
yeah,
with kind of what you were saying before, in the sense that it is still a job.
yeah,
um, I mean, like, you may not be the most excited about every game, but I think there's always some aspect of the production that you'll find exciting, and maybe that's more important to look for, like you said, right? Getting that more
yeah.
responsibility, developing these skills to get you to where you want to be in a couple of years.
Yeah, and you know, I think once you get to a point where you've like checked the boxes, you've worked on the IPs that you've wanted to do, you start looking for new challenges. You know, I had a lead producer that was working at Tech Nine, who I talked to him, and he'd been in the industry for like 20, 30 years, and his big thing with going and working on that was he's like, this is a challenge. I've never made these kinds of games. I've never managed these kinds of pipelines, and I want to challenge myself. I want to see like, can I do it? You know, and he'd worked at Nintendo. He'd done all these things. Um, and so, yeah, I think like exactly like you said, it's still a job. You know, you still have to think about it that way. As exciting as it could be, as you know, you get to play the build on your lunch break or whatever, and you're like, this is awesome. You learn all the background secrets. You know, it's still a job. You still got to do your best. You still got to deal with what you're at, and you know, and keep moving.
Yeah, and like one of the things that I love, particularly about your story, is coming through the military. And I know passion is one thing, but I know like the military really instills discipline. And in my head, the way that I picture it, passion is like a fire, and then the discipline is what helps guide the fire. Can you talk about how your military experience helped translate into your success as an employee and working in the video game industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Um, that's it. And I would say there's tons of lessons that I've learned, and I could talk about that stuff for hours. But I think one of the biggest things that I learned that you don't really get to learn super easily in the real world, and I don't think a lot of people learn this lesson, or it takes them a really long time to do so, is learn how to embrace the suck. That is a saying that we had, that, just embrace the suck. I was in a combat role, I was in a combat job, so my training was going to the field, not showering for, a week or a month sometimes, and it being cold or it being too hot or whatever. And it would be really easy to just complain all the time. Be like, this sucks. Like, I hate this. Why am I here? Blah, 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 blah. Whatever. But that you're then putting all this energy into something that's not going to amount to anything. I was still there. I still had to do my job, whether it sucked or it didn't suck. I still had to be part of this team. And so I think when you finally make that swap where you're like, this is gonna suck and that's fine, and I'm gonna power through. um, Doing that in the military is one thing, and then you come out and you do it in the civilian world, and it's way easier. Because it's like, oh man, I'm in my comfy chair, and I gotta sit on a call for an hour and a half, this sucks, blah. But it's like it's being able to be of the mindset of understanding, yes, this isn't going to be fun, this is going to be whatever, but I need to do it. This is part of my job. I need to work through this, to attain, again, we've been talking, these other goals, these further things that I want to do. you know and that's just something I feel like I've noticed, and not just in games but in general, that people can have a tough time um, figuring that out, because it's not natural. Something's not fun, you're like, you kind of shy away from it. But yeah, embracing the suck, I think, has been invaluable for me coming out of the military, and it'll just continue to be, because I've been really lucky right now. It's sweet, I'm gonna get to go work on Call of Duty, but maybe the next jump for me is working on something I'm not as excited about, and maybe it is really tough. But I was able to jump up and become a producer by going to do that, or a senior producer, whatever. um, I'm still on track. The track's just bumpy, that's it.
Right. That's really cool. I think kind of something that goes along with that is making sure that you stay pretty well rounded, understanding that the experiences that you go through may have some benefit, tangible or intangible, in the future. I know for myself, I love exercising, I love working out, and when you say embracing the suck, it's that's what it's all about, dude. Like,
Yeah.
I did marching band in high school. I hated marching band in high school, but I did it all 4 years, and it really taught me. I'm not gonna enjoy everything I do, but at least I have the mental fortitude to push through to get to what I do want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, dude. And talking about fitness and stuff, one of the best things one of my friends said, he's like, I had just started going into the gym and learning how to gym. And he was like, we were going there one day, and I was a lot weaker than like I thought I would be, because I'd never been in and stuff. And he's like, dude, it's fine. He's like, this beginning part's gonna suck. And he's like, you know what? Then like a couple weeks are gonna go by, and you're gonna lift a little bit more, and it's gonna be awesome. And then a couple weeks are gonna go by, and you're gonna lift a little bit more, and before you know it, you're gonna be lifting 60, 70 more pounds than you were when you started. And he's like, it's those little wins in the storm that you have to keep focused on, and you have to say like, yeah, dude, I lifted 5 more pounds this week than I did last week. That's awesome. And you're just working to continue climbing up this mountain. So yeah, I can totally relate to that stuff as well. I've ran way too many miles in my life at this point
Yeah.
that have all sucked. I am not a runner, nor do I enjoy it.
And one of the things I love about that is just like bringing it back to how that relates to video games, right? Like the leveling up when you're going to the gym, when you just go and crank out like a few reps in your visit there, like you may not see it, but your experience level is going up just a little bit, right? And that's kind of why I wish we had bars over our head so I could look in the mirror and say my experience has gone up X amount over the past day.
Yeah.
But like that's one of the cool things is like understanding how video games translates into real life. And like, I know you've got a million examples of how that's worked out for you, but like, how has, like, can you give us some, like, how you've used your learnings in video games in the industry to actually pursue your passion?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, it was a lot of very early on. It was translating my experience into video game language. You know, I had a tons of leadership and management experience, but I didn't. I needed to put this new coat of paint on it, you know, and figure out how that stuff worked because it was different. And you know, one of the big things and one of the really good pieces of feedback that I got from a senior producer was, you know, we were talking about, we were having like a 6 month, you know, review or whatever, and we were talking about stuff, and he was like, your follow up isn't great. And he's like, you got to kind of work on you get these tasks and you start them really well, but your follow up isn't great. Um, and we kind of talked through it, and I also kind of realized that, and in talking through it, one of the things that I had that like, oh my god moment was, for me, coming from the military, to be a leader, you have to be kind of become a subject matter expert. You know, I was in artillery, so if I wanted to become a section chief of a gun of a team, I needed to know every part of the gun. I needed to know every part of all the jobs that it takes to fire, you know, to fire an artillery piece, all these things. And only then could I go and could I become a section chief. And for production, so I go into production and I have that mindset of like, okay, I'm in charge of the animation team right now. I need to learn how to be an animator. I need to do this so I can understand what they're going through. I can anticipate the issues that they're running into and stuff. And I explained that, and my senior producer was like, "No, no, you don't." He's like, you have leads, you have people there who are your translators. You're monitoring the work. You know, you're making sure things are getting done. You're making sure things are going through the pipeline. You're talking to other departments, but you're not there to learn how to be an animator. We have animators for that. We have a lead animator for that who's going to translate that stuff for you. And that was a huge aha moment because then I stopped putting so much energy into trying to learn these jobs and learn how to do these things, and I put more energy into just managing the pipeline and talking with the lead. And he said, you know, yes, you're going to learn stuff just by being in the industry and working with these teams for so long, but that just comes with time. You know, he's like, I didn't open up a book on, he had a little bit of an engineering background. He's like, I didn't open up a book and just read about engineering before I became a producer. It was just working with engineers. You start to understand the same problems will make their will rear their head, you know, and then you're like, I know how to deal with this now. And so yeah, that was, I mean, that was huge for me, and it was that kind of moment where I was like, okay, there's going to be more stuff like this, and I need to just kind of continue to be aware and continue to learn. You know, I learned through pain a lot. You know, I screwed up with the credits on the Life is Strange remaster, and it became a thorn in our side towards the end of that. And now I'm like, yeah, I'm never going to screw up credits. If I ever get that again, it's not going to happen because I learned the hard way. You know, the same thing with learning Jira. You know, production's best friend is there. I've done so many different workflows and schemes, and having to redo them because if you publish a workflow scheme, you can't edit it, so then you have to make a new one, and then you have to disconnect that. Like I've done that so many times, you know, and it's the like learning through pain in a way, and again, it sucks, but it's gonna make you remember so that the next time you have to do it, you're gonna be like, I don't want to do it like that again. I want to do it the smarter way, you know. So yeah, for me that those have been huge, and I'm sure going into Call of Duty, it's a whole new game from what I've been working on the last year and a half. There's going to be a whole new set of things. It's a new studio, so there's going to be a million learning opportunities, and there's going to be a million opportunities for me to fall down and get back up.
And like, that's an amazing like story, especially like how you've interacted with so many different people across the industry. And I know one of the challenges a lot of our listeners are going through is like, okay, well, that's not my story, right? I'm in a different situation. I'm coming fresh out of college, or I work retail, or like I'm just an indie developer and I don't know what to do. Like, can you go over some of the like aha stories that you've learned about people that have had non-traditional ways into the industry?
Yeah, I'm trying to. I think my story is really good. I know that my senior producer, the one I had been talking about, he actually worked on a military base as a contractor, and he did a lot of simulation for, um, helicopter guys and stuff. And he then, from that simulation, he was, again, basically a producer managing stuff. And then that translation translated to him getting into games because he understood how to work with engineers. He understood how to manage a pipeline. It was all these transferable skills, and he was able to get started and kind of keep rolling with it. And I think for a lot of people early on, it's figuring out what transferable skills you have, but also, figuring out what is it you need to do in the meantime, and know that, hey, maybe I'm not going to come out of college and be able to work directly on the thing I want to work on. But, again, looking towards that goal, we interviewed somebody who who she was interviewing for a production position, but I think she more so wanted to be in cinematic art. And talking to her kind of after the interview and stuff, I was talking to her on LinkedIn, and I was like, if you really want to be in cinematic art, look at cinematic art. Look for positions in that, in like, the junior level and stuff, and figure out, what are the things that you've done already that can translate over, but also what are the things that you need to keep learning, you know? And so I think for, military special, especially, there's tons of people that come from these backgrounds that may not seem like they transfer over, but it just takes some time to look at what are the expectations of this job, or what are the things, responsibilities that they want me to do, and can I think of times that I've done something similar. Maybe I wasn't working on a game, but I manage people. I understand how to talk to people. I understand how to measure, are they doing good work, are they doing bad work, do they need, a little extra oomph, or are they having a really tough time, where they really excited about Kingdom Hearts 4, and then they saw the trailer and it bummed them out because it's not going in the direction that they want, and now their work is suffering on a Friday. Being able to recognize that you don't need to be in games to learn that kind of stuff, and that I think that's one of the reasons why I love leadership so much, is because you can learn it in so many different areas, and it just takes a little bit of time to, like I said, put that fresh coat of paint on, and all of a sudden, all these skills and all these things that you have carried over. It's like starting a new game plus.
Awesome. And I know you mentioned also, I think you got in touch with a recruiter from Activision, and
Mm-hmm.
they were your connection to help get into your current role.
Yeah,
Um, so for people looking at a job description, I know unfortunately sometimes a job description has a huge, I would say, laundry list of requirements,
yeah.
and I know it can also help to kind of have a mentor, have some guidance. How do you recommend people fresh out of college or looking to transition find people that could help guide them in the right direction?
Yeah, I mean, so I did it at somewhat of a tough time because I was graduating right as COVID was in the heat of everything, and so I had to do all of, and I was going into a brand new industry where I didn't have a whole lot of connections. I was looking at places outside of Chicago where I was, um, and so I used LinkedIn a ton for that. And I'm not the best about posting on there, but I'm really good at finding people in a company that work a job that I want to eventually work, or work on a team that I want to be at, connecting with them, and talking to them. And you'll realize, once you understand how to navigate that conversation, you can things just start to jump up from there. So like for me, my example, I was looking at Activision because I was like, Call of Duty, want to do it, let's go. And so what I did is I went on LinkedIn, I looked at Activision, I looked at all the employees, and I filtered it down by people that had military experience. I found a guy on there who was a Marine who's going through an MBA rotational program, and I shot a message as, hey, can we chat? I'm really trying to break into the industry, and I'm trying to learn, what can I do? He said sure. We chatted, and he's like, hey man, I'm brand new in this MBA rotational thing. I've been here like a month. He's like, I know probably less than you do, um, but he's like, I know a guy who's an Air Force vet who's a recruiter who loves helping out, veterans, and loves doing all these things. Let me get you connected to him. So I then got connected to Jacob, um, who like I said, things shot off from there. We started talking about games. We met a handful of times. He's the one that recommended I talk to Steve, who, then I got tons of feedback from Steve. And then he also introduced me to like D&I recruiters at Activision. And eventually, along this long list, I got to the production specific recruiters, had a good relation with both of them, and they started just feeding me roles, as they kind of came up, and I met them last fall, and it wasn't until what is it, April now, that I got the job. So even though I met the right people, it still took some time. But I love that part of my story because it's like I found one person on the sliver that we were both Marines, and it turned into, you know, get this relationship I have with Steve, where I get tons of great feedback from him. I talk to him all the time, Jacob, and then all these other people that I've met to eventually getting a job, and I think it's just a matter of trying to find what's that sliver that you can jump onto that'll then get you moving in the right direction, so um, doing that. I think the other really good piece of advice I got was looking in the indies. Making games is so available right now. You can download Unreal Engine for free. You can download whatchamacallit. You can, the I can't, of course I'm blanking on the other
Unity?
engine. Unity, there you go. Yes, you could download Unity for free. It does not take a ton of people to make a game, and so if you're looking in the indies, these are either groups of people or very small studios that just need people. They need people that can come in and are willing to work hard and learn along the way and accomplish what they're trying to do. And so the ability that you have as a transitioning person or as a college grad is you get into the indies, your acceleration from entry level person to having way more responsibility is quick. I went from being a junior producer doing whatever to, we lost a few producers that moved on. So then I was leading a game, and I was delivering milestones as a junior producer, which is crazy. But, I got the chance to do it because I was working at a small studio that needed me to do it. And those are big things that I got to talk about in my interviews and stuff. Was like, hey, I'm not just managing a Jira and managing a team. I've managed multiple teams. I've managed an entire project for 3-4 months at this point. I've delivered the main goals of that project, all because I worked at this small studio. I mean, Deck Nine's not even that small anymore, but you have you look to that, your chances of getting a bite are that much better. And there's so many out there. There's so many people don't even realize are out there. I feel like every day I'm seeing a new studio or a new game, pop up. So I would say those are my two best ways to go about it. You find that person that can get you that sliver, that can give you either a good feedback, or you can find a person that becomes a good mentoring figure. And also, look at the indies. It's great to have aspirations to want to work on some, massive games, but you've got to get there, and you've got to start that. You got to start that road at some point, and a lot of times, I think the indies is a great way to start.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And like one of the things that you kind of touched on a little bit before is like making mistakes and picking yourself up from there. And then you were just talking about like the whole networking aspect, and you mentioned the sliver that you were able to jump on that helped you get to where you are. But can you talk about like how many people did you reach out to that never responded,
Oh man.
or maybe you had just one conversation with? Because yes, it's cool to see the success, but like, what's the effort that you put in, like as a whole, so that we
Yeah.
can kind of see that it's not just about getting lucky, but like there's a process to getting lucky. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah, absolutely. And yeah, you said it perfectly. Like it's people see that and they're like, "Oh, you just met the right person. It was great." But like I had sent out so many connection requests with messages to people um at all sorts of places. I still like now we'll get a connection like acceptance thing and I'm like, who is this person? And then I'll look at the message that I sent and I'm like, oh, this is when I was trying to talk to somebody at, Guerrilla Games, or when I was trying to talk to somebody at Respawn, months ago. I got one from somebody recently who I actually had interviewed with, and I had shot her a thing when I was first looking for my job back in like fall of 2020. And I just had gotten gotten the connection thing, and I was like, oh, this is, whatever, this is funny. So for me, it was about making a plan and making it almost like eh, kind of like a side quest to the main quest. My main thing is getting the job, right? What are the things I got to do? Well, I got to work on my resume, right? I got to work on my cover letters. I got to find open positions at different studios. But I don't necessarily need to connect with people, but I probably should. So for me, it was like when I graduated, I didn't have a job and I was just looking. I was like, okay, every day I'm going to get in three good applications, not just attach my resume, submit, call it a day. Three good applications in, and every day I'm going to try to send out five connection requests on LinkedIn to various ends of people, and this could be people that are directly at places. Hopefully they're people at the studios, publishers that I'm applying at that day, but maybe it's somebody that I just came across that seems interesting or has something in common with me. And I think for me, gamifying it in that way helped me to stay the course, because I was like, it's easy to be like, oh, I'm just going to go on LinkedIn and do whatever. But LinkedIn, if you don't use it right, can just turn into like another Facebook or another Instagram. You're just scrolling. Maybe you're looking at somebody's stuff, but you're not doing whatever. But if you're like, hey, today I woke up and I know I got to send out three good connection requests to people, and you're in there, you're searching through, I mean, I don't even know Activision has multiple thousands of people that work there, and you're just scrolling through the people that are on LinkedIn and trying to find that sliver, trying to find that person. Um, it's a lot, and it can be disheartening. I in the process where I was looking for this job, I mean, it was the same thing. I applied everywhere. I was sending out the connection requests. I was doing all those things, and I still, wasn't getting things hitting for a long time. And I was somewhat in the ideal position because I had a job, I had a good line with recruiters, I had a mentor figure, and I still wasn't getting anything. Um, so you have to stay the course. You have to continue doing those applications, continue to do those connection things, because being on the flip side, having been a hiring manager, I've looked at people who have been referred to me or people who have reached out to me on LinkedIn. I look at them before I look at any other stack of resumes. It's just what I do. Maybe it's the right way to do it, maybe it's the wrong way, whatever. But that's just naturally how I went about it. And we got really good candidates just from doing that. So if you're thinking about that from the candidate position, maybe that one conversation with that person is what helps push you over again when you're compared to all the other candidates.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of this is like just understanding the logistics of being a human being when you've got a million different people. So in my experience, like if I've got 1,000 resumes of people that are applying to a role, like I cannot take time to really go in depth into every single one of those resumes because there just isn't enough time. So
Yeah.
part of this is you have to rely on like who are the people that you already know, like, and trust that you've got experience with because there's so many parts of, hiring talented people where a big part of it is like what what do you know and what do you trust about the person, right?
Hmm.
Because if you're looking at a sheet of paper and you're forced to make a judgment on a person based on a sheet of paper, like how accurately can you do that? I
Yeah.
mean, unfortunately, not everybody is knows how to communicate their value on, on a resume.
Yeah.
So that's where we have to rely on things like are there referrals? Do I know this person personally? Have I worked with them for years, or have I just had, a 5 minute conversation with them on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah.
So
No.
yeah, thank you for giving us your insight. And it's like it part of that is like now that you know what it is to work in production, what are things that people could do like following your footsteps to get that experience because they're like how can I be a producer if nobody's going to give me the opportunity, like how would you recommend somebody go about doing that?
Yeah. I think it's a number of things. So it's looking at your own experience and saying, hey, do I have the project management experience or the management in general experience to, you know, maybe it doesn't directly translate over, but it can fill the gaps and it gives me something to talk about. You know, if I'm coming into college and I have no management experience at all, well, maybe I need to get some of that. And you can do that in games. You know, I have a friend of mine who I've started mentoring who went to college with me. He got his degree in game dev, and he was coming out. He saw that I had gotten a job. Like, was like so surprised because he was like, "I didn't even know you were applying in games," and I was like, "Yeah, I didn't either until a couple months ago." And you know, I started helping him along the path. You know, he got into QA at at Maximum Games, and he had the opportunity there to be in the industry. But I also, when we were going through his resume, he was a producer on a fan Halo project. And I'm like, dude, like, I was like, this is relevant experience. This is, even though it's a fan project, it's a side gig. You can still talk about this. You've done the job. You've worked at Jira. You've managed a pipeline. Like, you can absolutely talk about these things, you know, and put those in there. And now you're at a studio publisher, you have the opportunity to get that time in, and then you have an opportunity to also, like, eventually maybe you move into a lead position or you find a management position there, you know, and you kind of make your way. On the flip side of that too, you know, if we're talking about entry level people, one of the big things you're looking for is like, is this person teachable? You know, is this person willing to learn? Do they have the passion to do so? If they have those three things, I can teach them to be a producer. No problem. You know, I don't need you to come in and know how to produce, know how to do all the things. I need you to be somebody that's going to be a good culture fit. If you're going to be on my team, I need to know that I can work with you and I can depend on you and that you're willing to learn from me and everybody here. And if you check those boxes, sweet, like, let's do it. And that's where I think those referrals and those other little intangibles come into play, because that's your way to prove that kind of stuff. You know, if you're getting referred by somebody, if Steve is referring somebody to me, I trust Steve. I trust Steve's judgment, you know, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to look at this. I'm going to look at this dude. And Steve knows me. He knows the kind of worker that I am. So he knows maybe this person would be a great fit. Maybe this person wouldn't, but I'm going to definitely look at that person. Um, you know, so I think that's where you get to shine, because I'm the same way. Like, my resume looks good because I'm lucky my soon to be wife is a really good designer. But I'm always been of the mindset, like, get me in the room to talk to you, I'll sell myself. I could talk to a wall, you know, for days. And so it's and that's where I'm going to show you, like, hey, I want to be here, I'm passionate about this, and I'm willing to learn, I'm willing to do this stuff. You know, when I was in my interviews for Call of Duty, they're like, okay, well, you know, this is like an AP role, so you're kind of just laterally moving. And I'm like, that's fine. You know, I've had a great opportunity the last couple of months to lead a game, but in doing so, there are areas in my foundation that I'm sure I haven't plugged. There's holes there, you know. So it's like, this is my opportunity to go be a true AP and learn, hey, maybe there's some things I missed, and I can fill those gaps in my foundation, so that when I do am ready to make the big jump to producer, I know that I'm good. I know that I've covered all my bases. I've done all these things, and I'm ready to go. So, um, yeah, I think it's that's where that, like, self awareness comes in. And, like, what are the holes in my foundation that I need to fill in, or if there aren't any, okay, like, who do I need to be talking to? Like, who do I need to be selling myself to?
And like, I love that you mentioned the ability to sell yourself and sell your experience. Can you take us through, like, what does it mean to sell yourself? Like, are there physical examples that you give? Like, do you have, I don't know, what are like the tips and tricks, quote unquote, to sell yourself?
Yeah, I think uh, definitely for me is it's a little different, because I know that I'm a talker and I know that I'm fast, but there's some people that, like, they need a little bit more time. And so one of the best things that you can do is, when you're getting ready for an interview or you're getting ready to talk to somebody, you know, do your research on them. It's super easy to go look on LinkedIn, and people smirk when they see that you're looking at them on LinkedIn, because they're like, ah, this guy's doing research on me, cool, you know. And they like seeing that, because that means that you're taking this thing seriously. You're not just rolling into it. But when it comes to I think when it comes to selling yourself, a lot of that, especially for games, can really boil down to passion, and that's an easy excuse, but I think one of the best things that I heard from that's feedback from some of the interviewers was just my passion, was bleeding through everything I was talking about, because it wasn't I want to be at Activision so I can get paid and I can have Activision on my resume. I can work on Call of Duty. I can get a bunch of free stuff, blah, 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 whatever. It was like, I want to work here. I want to work at this company because this company makes a product that I believe in. And it also does things on the side with a nonprofit that I also believe in. And I want to be part of that and I want to contribute to that, and having that fire in your eyes, people can pick up on that. I when I swapped from applying for business jobs to applying for game jobs, I told this to Steve really early on. I was like, dude, my attitude, my feelings totally changed because I was excited. I was like this. I was like, yes, this is awesome. And so if you're able to show that you're passionate about the product, you're passionate about what they're doing, if you're not just able to talk about it, but it you can see it when they're talking, whether it's all these hand movements I'm doing or just, being what, however it is, um, that's something that will always shine through and will leave a lasting impression. When we've interviewed people, I've talked to people that love the Life is Strange franchise, but they don't get stuck on talking about it. And that's one of those keys is I'm not going to go into this interview and let's like nerd out about Life is Strange. Great, but talk about how important that franchise is to you and why you want to work there. Why you want to work on that for maybe for other people out there. So I there definitely are other things, but yes, I love seeing passion in candidates, and I love when I'm talking to people, hearing the passion, because that means that they have a goal in mind, and that means that they're going to do what they need to do to get there. And whether that's this job or the next job, I told some of the people that I was connecting with early on, when I was talking about Call of Duty, I was like, I'm going to work there. It may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, it may be in 5 to 7 years, but I'm going to get there because that's my goal, and I'm going to do all these little things I got to do right now to get there. So, and that's that passion that can just ooze out of you. So, don't be afraid to show that when you're talking to people, whether it's in an interview or whether it's in a connection thing, because they'll see it and they'll feed off of it.
Gotcha. And then like touching on that a little bit is like, what are some tangible things, like, because there's one thing to be passionate and like having the feeling, but
Mm-hmm.
it's another thing to actually harness that feeling and to do something with it, right?
Yeah.
Like two people can say they're equally passionate about something, but if person A has gone and, created game design documents and volunteered for organizations and helped and scoured LinkedIn and connected with 1,000 people in the game industry versus person B who just is passionate about
Yeah.
gaming, right? Like, can you give some of the tips and tricks? Like, what are things that you could see that would be evidence or more tangible, I guess, proof of passion?
Yeah. And that's definitely the trap with passion is you don't want to fall back on it and be like, yeah, well, I'm really passionate about, and kind of like you said, but not do anything. Um, if for this case, I would say be like Batman, prep time. Prep for your interview, prep for your conversation, do your research, do whatever it is that you need to do, um, to show them, hey, I'm not just talking the talk, I'm walking the walk. One of the really cool things I've never had this in an interview, but I was interviewing for Wounded Warrior Project is starting to they want to start up a kind of their like a nonprofit arm that's focused on gaming, and one of the interviewers was an Army Ranger. And so, I was answering one of the questions, and then he used an example, and I mentioned Rangers in the example, and he was like, "Ah, I see, Matt. Sounds like you did some research, huh?" And I was like, "Yeah, maybe a little bit, And I didn't talk about the Rangers. I didn't like divulge their whole history, but I said something and that made him know that I looked you up. I took notes and I created a strategy to essentially make you like me. And I mean that's kind of what part of an interview is, like, hey, I want to convince you that you like me and you want to pay me money to do stuff. And I think when you prep and you do that, that's you showing that you're passionate, because you're not just resting on your laurels. You're not, yeah, I've put 1,000 hours into Call of Duty. Great. How does that make you a good producer? You know, but by prepping and my one of my favorite stories that you had told me, Steve, and that I used all the time was, how do you intangibly prep for an interview? Like, it's easy to take notes on your interviewees, and it's easy to take notes on the company, but like, what's that X factor that you can do? And Steve had told me the story when I was interviewing, and he said that there was a guy that was interviewing for an art director position at one of the PlayStation studios, and he was prepping for his interview. And when he went in there, he brought his iPad in there, and he had a bunch of concept art. And he was like, "Hey, let me show you like my work. Like, let's not talk. Like, let me just show you what the deal is." And he did a bunch of concept art based off of, I think if I remember, it was, what was it, Sunny San Diego, right? um, and he ended up getting the job. And so for me, I got in my head as I was applying, like, what's my iPad? What is my thing that somebody else is not going to do when they walk into this interview? Because all the other candidates have access to the same tools. They have access to LinkedIn. They have access to the internet. They could do the same research, create the same notes that I can. But how do I digest those notes, and how do I make something of it to make myself set apart? So when I was interviewing for Deck Nine, they said that this was a brand new position. They didn't really know how they wanted this position to develop. So I said, okay, that's my iPad. So I wrote out in like an Excel sheet, I wrote out like, these are the learning objectives for somebody in this position. These are the things that you want to do. And what I did was looked at a listing they had up for a producer and the skill sets and the responsibilities that they had. And I said, okay, how do I break that down for a junior level person, for them to learn, and work in that area so that they could then become proficient to become a producer. I wrote that out, and I said, when I first started my interview with them, I was like, hey, I have something I want to show you guys. If we can leave like 5 minutes at the end, that would be great. And they all looked at themselves like they were crazy, like I was crazy. And yeah, I showed it to them at the end. I emailed it to them after, and I I didn't really get any feedback after, so I don't know how much that contributed to me, but I know it set me apart. And that was the most important thing. I know that everybody in that interview remembered me as a crazy dude who wrote up this thing for how a junior producer becomes a producer. Um, and that's another piece of the puzzle. Being passionate but being memorable. Like, you want someone. My the best feedback I got, which was awesome to hear, and it totally set me over the moon. When I was talking to the recruiter after he told me I'd gotten the Activision job, he was like, "Oh yeah," and the feedback from all the senior producers was basically, "We want to hire more Matt Sanchez's." And I was like, "That's like the best thing you could hear from an interview." That's like, there's nothing above that. That's basically them saying, "Hey, let's clone you because you're that awesome that we want you to be on all the teams." Um, and so, yeah, dude, it just being passionate, being memorable, being prepared. All there's all these, like, this concoction that you can make, yourself, all this work that you have to do, that will hopefully result in you getting that job, and result in you getting into the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, that is one of the reasons why I absolutely love having you on the podcast, so that you can, this is like the living example of like the work ethic, the heart that it takes to work in an industry that is ridiculously competitive. And
Yeah.
this is the type of pattern that I've seen in effective employees, and you're just the embodiment of that. So thank you so much for taking some time out of your Sunday to share your story and to share this inspiration with all of our fans out here. And with that being said, I see we're already past the hour. It's crazy how fast time flies by when you're having these types of conversations. So, Mr. Byron, if you'd like to take us home.
Yeah, sure. Again, thanks so much. I usually ask our guests if they can kind of leave parting advice for our audience, but the conversation kind of naturally uh, went towards that direction already. So I think we're pretty good in that sense. Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast again, speaking with us. Your journey is really cool. I'd love to have you on again in probably 6 months, because obviously you're
Mhm.
moving forward, um, and that's pretty inspiring to me. And So the last thing I'd like to ask is, where can people find you? Do you post any content online, a blog or LinkedIn, stuff like that?
So I'm trying to get better about LinkedIn. I haven't figured out exactly how I want to do posting and stuff on there, but I'm very active on it. That would be the best place to find me. I like we were talking about before we went live. You know, I've dabbled with wanting to write like a blog or something, and maybe I will. But I'm really passionate about helping people, you know, get into whether it's the industry or their job. So if you reach out to me on LinkedIn, I will be one of those people that gets back to you. I promise. Even if it isn't right away, I absolutely will, because if there's any person that I can just give a small piece of advice to and that helps them get a job, like, awesome. That makes me feel great. So yeah, definitely find me on LinkedIn, just Matt Sanchez or Matthew Sanchez, I believe. Um, and yeah, I love coming on here talking to you guys. Like I said, I could talk to a wall, but I would absolutely love to come back, and it'd be cool to see, like, you know, the progression in 6 months and kind of see where I'm at, and we could talk through some more fun stuff.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much, and thank you guys for listening to Empower Up. That concludes this episode. Just like to make a quick reminder that we are on YouTube, so we record all these episodes. We'll have this up probably. We try to upload every Friday, so we'll try to get this up on YouTube on Friday, Spotify, basically anywhere that you can watch this or listen to this if you're on a long commute like I am. I live in LA. So yeah, thank you guys so much, and we'll see you on the next episode.